Have you ever been judged before anyone even knew your name? Imagine walking onto a plane, holding a valid first-class ticket, yet within minutes, a stranger demands your arrest simply because of the color of your skin. That was the reality, Dr. Selena Moore faced, calm, dignified, and unshaken. She stood her ground while chaos unfolded around her. But here's the twist no one expected. Selena wasn't just any passenger. She was the CEO and chairwoman of the very airline where this humiliation took place. Now picture yourself in her shoes. Do you stay silent to keep the peace? Or do you rise and claim your rightful seat, knowing the world is watching? Would you respond with anger or with the kind of quiet strength that can turn a single act of cruelty into a movement for justice? This story isn't just about one woman's fight. It's about dignity, about choices, and about what happens when we decide enough is enough. So as you listen, ask yourself, what would I do if it were me? If this speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the rest of this powerful journey. Let's begin. The departure hall of Chicago O'Hare International Airport was alive with its usual mixture of weariness and anticipation. Business travelers scrolled through emails with weary eyes. Families wrangled restless children, and solo adventurers leaned against charging stations, sipping coffee while watching the clock. The electronic boards above hummed with constant updates, their neon green numbers flickering from on time to boarding soon. Near gate C-27, however, the ordinary rhythm fractured. This black woman has no business being in this line. The sharp voice sliced through the air like broken glass. Conversations faltered, laughter quieted, and dozens of eyes shifted toward the source of the outburst. Patricia Holt, a middle-aged woman in a crisp cream blazer and designer heels, stood with her manicured fingers gripping the handle of a Louis Vuitton carry-on. Her face was contorted with indignation, lips pressed thin, eyes narrowing like daggers at the woman standing opposite her in the first-class boarding lane. That woman was Dr. Selena Moore. Selena, dressed in a simple navy travel suit with comfortable flats, carried herself with an elegance that needed no ornament. Her natural curls were pulled back in a low bun, her minimal jewelry understated. She stood quietly, holding her boarding pass and a leather laptop bag, as Patricia's accusations rang out for everyone to hear. "I don't know how she sneaked in here," Patricia continued, her voice rising, arms gesturing as though swatting an invisible annoyance. "But I am not boarding this flight until she is arrested and removed. This is first class. She clearly does not belong here." Gasps echoed softly from the line behind them. Some passengers shifted awkwardly. Others stared, frozen between curiosity and discomfort. A young mother whispered to her husband, and a businessman adjusted his tie, choosing to look down at his phone rather than intervene. Selena did not move. She did not flinch. Her eyes, deep with years of weathering storms far fiercer than this, simply observed Patricia with calm patience. She had learned long ago that reacting to such venom with anger often fed it, and though her heart pressed heavily in her chest, she drew a slow, steady breath, grounding herself in the composure that had carried her through boardrooms, courtrooms, and now apparently boarding gates. "Ma'am," Selena said softly, her voice even, "I am a passenger, just like you." Her words were simple, but they cut through Patricia's tirade like a needle popping a balloon. "Still," Patricia let out a humorless laugh, tossing her hair back. "Oh, don't play games with me. Look at you. You think you can just walk into first class dressed like that?" She gestured with disdain, her tone dripping with superiority. "Honey, you should be back there with the others, Not here. This section is for people who can afford it. Behind them, phones were being lifted quietly, recording. Among those watching was Elena Cruz, a 21-year-old media student traveling to Los Angeles. She had her camera rolling already, filming snippets for her travel vlog. At first, she thought she'd captured just another angry traveler complaining about a delayed flight. But as Patricia's accusations grew sharper, Elena realized she was witnessing something different, something ugly, something that needed to be documented. A gate agent, Derek Lawson, approached, his smile tight, voice cautious. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing nervously between Patricia and Selena. "Yes, there is," Patricia snapped, pointing an accusatory finger. "This woman is trying to sneak into first class. I demand you remove her immediately." Derek hesitated. He'd worked this gate for nearly a decade. He had seen angry passengers before those who complained about seat assignments, luggage weight, boarding groups. But this felt different. This was venom directed at a person, not a situation. He looked at Selena, who silently handed over her boarding pass. Derek scanned it. Flight 452, seat 2A, first class, confirmed. His shoulders eased slightly. "She's a first-class passenger, ma'am," he said carefully. "Her ticket is valid. Everything is in order." For a second, Patricia's face faltered. Then her anger reignited, hotter than before. No, I don't accept that. Look at her. Does she look like someone who belongs in first class? She's probably forged that ticket or tricked someone. I want a supervisor. Right now." Her voice grew louder, echoing into the terminal. Passengers were openly watching now, their eyes darting between Patricia's flushed face and Selena's quiet composure. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Selena remained still. Her mind flickered with old memories, times she had been doubted, dismissed, diminished because of her skin, her gender, her presence in spaces that others thought she didn't deserve. She thought of the years spent proving herself over and over, not just in boardrooms, but in hotel lobbies, restaurants, airports. She thought of the promise she made to herself long ago, never let someone else's prejudice dictate her worth. And yet, a small ache grew in her chest. Not because she doubted herself, but because she knew, too well, how these moments could spiral. "Ma'am." Derek tried again, his voice firm now. "She is in the correct line. Please lower your voice and allow us to continue boarding." Patricia crossed her arms, her face hardening into stubborn refusal. "I refuse to board until she is removed. Do you hear me? If this airline thinks it can put people like her next to me in first class, then I'll make sure everyone knows. I'll sue. Her rant was cut short by a new voice. "Excuse me," came a calm tone from behind. "Belonging to Jordan Blake, a young flight attendant just stepping into the gate area." His brown eyes flicked from Selena to Patricia, then back to Derek. "What seems to be the problem?" Derek gave a brief summary, keeping his voice neutral. Jordan's gaze lingered on Selena for a moment, noticing the quiet dignity in her posture, the way she refused to shrink. Something about it stirred him. He looked back at Patricia. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I assure you, she has every right to be here." But Patricia was not ready to surrender her imagined authority. Her voice rose again, sharp and entitled, as passengers shifted uncomfortably. "I'm telling you, this woman is trouble. If you don't remove her, I'll call the police myself." A gasp escaped Elena, who was still filming, her hand trembling slightly. She whispered to her camera, "This is unreal. She has no idea who she's messing with." Because Elena didn't know either, but she suspected. There was something about the way Selina stood there, something unspoken yet commanding. It was the air of someone who carried weight, who had nothing to prove. Patricia, blinded by arrogance, couldn't see it, and that was her first mistake. The boarding announcement chimed overhead, cheerful and automated, but the tension at gate C-27 had already thickened into something that no pre-recorded voice could soothe. A few passengers tried to slip past the confrontation, eyes averted, but most lingered close enough to watch the drama unfold. Patricia Holt, arms crossed and chin lifted, stood planted in front of the boarding lane like a self-appointed guardian of first-class respectability. Each second she refused to budge. The crowd's discomfort grew. "Until security gets here," she barked. "This flight is not boarding, not with her." Her finger once again stabbed the air toward Dr. Selina Moore, who remained rooted in place, her face a mask of calm restraint. Derek Lawson, the gate agent, was torn between keeping the process moving and managing an escalating scene that could easily spiral into chaos. His training had covered angry customers, but not racial accusations hurled at a passenger who clearly had every right to be there. Passengers murmured louder now. A man in a business suit whispered into his phone, likely recording or texting updates. A mother with 2 children pulled them aside protectively, not from Selina, but from Patricia's volatile energy. Jordan Blake, the young flight attendant, stepped closer to Selina, his presence subtle but steady, as if to silently communicate, "You are not alone. Ma'am, please step aside," Derek urged Patricia. His voice had lost its polite cadence. It was firm, measured. "I said no," Patricia snapped. "This airline has gone downhill if you let people like her parade around pretending they belong. I'll have you fired for this." Her threat hung in the air like a foul odor. Derek's jaw tightened. He was no stranger to entitled passengers. But this was something uglier, something personal. Elna Cruz, her phone still raised discreetly, felt her chest pounding as she filmed. She whispered into her mic, "She's doubling down. This is going viral." Selina shifted slightly, not out of intimidation, but to face Patricia squarely. Her voice was soft, but each syllable carried weight. "Your anger does not give you authority," Selina said, "and your prejudice does not change facts. I have my ticket, I have my seat, and I will take it." The crowd exhaled collectively. Even those who had been silent felt a spark of admiration for her poise. But Patricia was undeterred. She fumbled in her handbag, pulling out her phone. "Fine. If you won't handle this, I'll call the police myself." She began dialing 911 with dramatic flair. Gas rippled again. People shifted uneasily. Everyone knew how quickly calls like that could spiral into something dangerous for a black woman, no matter how baseless the accusation. Selina felt the weight of that risk, the familiar knot of injustice tugging at her ribs. Still, she refused to cower. Derek interjected quickly, holding up his hand. "That won't be necessary. I will call my supervisor." His tone had sharpened. He was trying to regain control. Patricia sneered, lowering her phone slightly, but not putting it away. "Good. Maybe someone with actual authority will do their job." As Derek radioed for assistance, Selina stood tall, eyes unwavering. Around them, the crowd was no longer neutral. Whispers grew into words of dissent, quiet but audible. "This isn't right. She has a ticket. Why's she doing this?" Elena's camera caught snippets of passengers exchanging uneasy glances. She knew she was filming something bigger than a travel inconvenience. She was capturing a raw, unfiltered moment of systemic prejudice, colliding with individual dignity. Minutes passed like hours until the supervisor arrived. Richard Campbell, a tall man in a tailored navy blazer, strode toward the gate with brisk authority. He carried the air of someone who had managed crises before, though even he wasn't prepared for what he walked into. "What's the issue here?" he asked, scanning the tense circle. Patricia launched into her rehearsed outrage, her words tumbling out in a flood. This woman doesn't belong in first class. She forged her ticket. She threatened me. If you don't remove her, I'll sue this airline into bankruptcy." Richard listened, his expression unreadable. He turned to Derek. "Is her ticket valid?" "Yes, sir," Derek said firmly. "Seat 2A. Confirmed." Richard's gaze shifted to Selina, who returned it steadily. There was something in her composure, something that gave him pause. He studied her for just a beat longer than necessary before turning back to Patricia. "Then she boards," Richard said flatly. "End of discussion." Patricia's mouth fell open. "Excuse me. Do you know who I am?" Richard's response was cold steel. "Do you know who she is?" The line struck like thunder in the room. Passengers craned their necks, murmurs swelling. Patricia blinked in confusion, clearly thrown off balance. Selina said nothing, but a flicker of realization passed through her eyes. Richard knew. Not everything, perhaps, but enough. Patricia sputtered, searching for a retort, but Richard's authority left no room. "You may board, ma'am," he said to Selina, his voice respectful. Then he looked at Patricia. "As for you, any further disruption, and you will not fly today." The crowd shifted audibly, murmurs rising into faint applause. For the first time, Patricia looked uncertain, her dominance faltering in the face of collective disapproval. But as boarding began again, her anger simmered. She pulled her phone back out, muttering under her breath. Helena's camera captured every word. "This isn't over. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of airline this is. Letting people like her pretend to be equals? It's disgusting." Selina walked down the jet bridge with measured steps, her dignity intact. Jordan Blake followed close behind, offering her a subtle nod of solidarity. The cabin awaited, but the storm was far from over. Inside the aircraft, Patricia's resentment only grew. She shoved her carry-on into the overhead bin with exaggerated force, glaring at Selina as though her presence were a personal insult. Other first-class passengers exchanged uneasy glances, whispers trailing. Selina slid into seat 2A, placing her bag neatly beneath the seat. Her hands rested in her lap, steady, though her mind swirled with the familiar ache of being targeted in spaces she had every right to occupy. Jordan approached, leaning slightly. "If you need anything, just let me know," he whispered. His voice carried an unspoken promise. "I see you. I'll stand with you." Selina gave him a small, grateful nod. As Patricia settled into her seat 2 rows back, her phone still clutched like a weapon, Elena uploaded the first clip from the gate to her social media. Within minutes, it began to spread. Comments poured in. "Unbelievable. Stand strong. Who is that woman?" And though no one in the cabin knew it yet, the story that began at Gate C-27 was about to ignite far beyond the walls of Flight 452. Because Patricia's demand for an arrest was not just another tantrum in an airport, it was the spark that would expose a truth far greater and unleash a reckoning no one had expected. The cabin lights dimmed as passengers finished stowing their bags. The hum of the engines built like a slow drum roll, promising the familiar rhythm of takeoff. Yet for all the routine, the air inside felt anything but ordinary. There was an undercurrent whispers about what had just unfolded at the gate. eyes darting between Patricia Holt and Dr. Selena Moore, the woman she had tried to erase. Patricia shifted in her seat 2 rows behind Selena, her every gesture a display of irritation. She pressed the call button almost immediately, waving down Jordan Blake, the young flight attendant who had already seen too much. "Yes," Ma'am Jordan asked politely, forcing his voice into neutral. "I don't feel safe," Patricia announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "That woman," she pointed an accusatory finger towards Selena, "threatened me. She shouldn't be allowed to sit there, surrounded by decent people. You need to move her, or I'll be forced to make a formal complaint." A few passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Some rolled their eyes. Others, though, shifted uncomfortably, as if wondering whether trouble might erupt mid-air. Jordan drew in a slow breath, keeping his tone even. "Ma'am, I can assure you Dr. Moore has every right to her seat. If you need to change seats yourself, I can check availability." The title Dr. Moore was deliberate, respectful, affirming. Patricia flinched at it, but instead of backing down, she doubled her volume. "I'm not moving. She should. She's dangerous." Selena turned her head slightly, meeting Jordan's eyes. She didn't interject, didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she clasped her hands calmly in her lap, her silence radiating dignity that words could never match. Jordan leaned closer to Patricia. "If you continue disrupting the cabin, I'll have to escalate this to the captain." Patricia recoiled, her lips parting in a gasp of mock outrage. "Are you seriously threatening me for trying to protect everyone?" Her voice carried over the rows, drawing more eyes. Elena Cruz, seated further back now, lifted her phone discreetly. She knew what she was capturing wasn't just gossip, it was evidence of how quickly prejudice could metastasize into hysteria. The captain's announcement temporarily cut through the tension. "Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." The plane taxied down the runway, lifting into the night sky. But as the lights of Chicago fell away, the real turbulence brewed inside. Barely 10 minutes into the flight, Patricia pressed the call button again. When Jordan arrived, she leaned in conspiratorially, but spoke loud enough for half the cabin to overhear. "She's hiding something," Patricia hissed. "I saw her bag. It's too heavy for a carry-on. You need to check it. For all we know, she's smuggling something dangerous." Selena inhaled sharply, not in fear, but in sheer disbelief. It wasn't enough for Patricia to humiliate her at the gate. Now she was escalating, layering lies upon lies. Selena's mind flashed to countless headlines of innocent people harassed, searched, criminalized for nothing more than the color of their skin. Jordan hesitated, caught between protocol and morality. Searching a passenger's bag without cause was no small matter. He opened his mouth, but before he could reply, another voice cut in. "Enough," a man from row 3 said firmly. He leaned forward, his voice carrying conviction. "She hasn't done anything. We all saw what happened at the gate. This is harassment." Patricia whipped around. "Excuse me? Do you even know who I am?" "No," the man shot back. "And I don't care. What I know is who she is. A paying passenger. Same as you." Applause broke out soft, hesitant at first, then swelling into something undeniable. Selena felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with an unexpected rush of solidarity. Patricia's face flushed crimson. She grabbed her phone, fingers flying across the screen, muttering under her breath. Selena finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "This needs to stop. I will not be moved. I will not be searched. And I will not be diminished by your lies." Her words carried through the cabin like a quiet bell. Not loud, not forceful, but unshakable. Patricia let out a bitter laugh. We'll see about that. Wait until security meets us in Los Angeles. They'll drag you out in handcuffs. A collective gasp spread. Selena's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the deep ache of knowing how plausible such a threat could become. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Her thoughts whispered inward. You've faced harder battles. Stand tall, not just for yourself, but for everyone watching. Jordan exchanged a glance with the lead flight attendant across the aisle. They both knew this couldn't continue unchecked. A quiet conversation over the interphone summoned Richard Campbell, who had taken a seat in business class, forward into the cabin. When he appeared, Patricia's eyes lit with self-righteousness. Finally, someone in charge. You need to have her restrained. She's a threat. But Richard's expression didn't match her anticipation. His voice was calm, deliberate. Ma'am, I've been briefed. Doctor, Moore has done nothing wrong. If this behavior continues, it will be you who faces consequences upon landing. Patricia blinked rapidly, her certainty wobbling. Consequences. For me, I'm the victim here. Richard's gaze was steady. No, you're the aggressor, and there are witnesses. Plenty of them. He gestured subtly toward Elena, whose phone remained poised. Patricia's head snapped around, realizing at last how much of her tirade had been preserved in unforgiving pixels. For a moment, silence reigned. The hum of the engine seemed louder, filling the void her outrage had left. Selena exhaled, her spine tall against the seat. She didn't need to gloat, didn't need to speak. The truth was carving its own path. Still, Patricia wasn't finished. With a final burst of desperation, she rose from her seat. This is outrageous, she shouted. I demand this plane turn around. Gaffes erupted. A flight attendant hurried forward, urging her back down. The captain's voice broke in, firm and unyielding. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. Everyone is expected to remain seated. Patricia froze, realizing she had crossed a line too visible to ignore. She sank back into her seat, trembling with a mixture of rage and dawning fear. The cabin slowly settled. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Some passengers offered Selena sympathetic glances, others subtle nods of respect. Jordan leaned down to whisper quietly. You handled that with more grace than most of us could have. I'm sorry you had to. Selena's eyes softened. It's not the first time, she admitted quietly, but I hope it will be one of the last. As the plane soared westward, the story was already unfolding across timelines and screens. Elena's upload had crossed 100,000 views. By the time the wheels touched down in Los Angeles, the world would know what had happened on Flight 452, and nothing would be the same again. By the time Aerostar Flight 452 reached cruising altitude, the cabin had quieted on the surface, but the digital storm outside was already raging. In the dim glow of the seatback screens, passengers refreshed their phones and exchanged whispers. Elena Cruz's first clip, just 2 minutes of grainy gate footage, had exploded past 500,000 views. By the 20-minute mark, hashtags began sprouting, Rome Alone 452, or Flying While Black, and most damning, Karen on a plane. Selena Moore sat motionless in seat 2A, outwardly calm, but inside her thoughts churned. She had spent her life building a company where dignity was supposed to be the standard, where every passenger should feel they belonged. And yet here she was, being accused, humiliated, and nearly criminalized on the very airline she had poured her soul into. The bitter irony pressed against her chest like weight she had carried before, only now magnified under the unforgiving lens of social media. Jordan Blake hovered nearby, checking in discreetly. "It's spreading fast," he murmured as he leaned close to offer her a glass of water. "People online are on your side." Selena took the glass, her fingers steady. "It's not about sides," she said quietly. "It's about truth." Rose back. Patricia Holt's phone buzzed with relentless notifications. She scrolled with furious fingers, realizing too late that her own face, twisted with venom, was now public property. Comments poured in under the video. She should be banned for life. How is this still happening in 2025? Protect that woman. Patricia's jaw clenched. She typed out a message to a friend. "They've turned on me, but I'll fix this. I'll make sure they regret siding with her." She hit send, her defiance unshaken. Meanwhile, Elena couldn't believe the velocity of the response. She posted a second clip, the in-flight argument. Patricia demanding Selena's bag be searched. Within minutes, national influencers had retweeted it. A journalist she followed DM'd her, "Can we use your footage on the evening news?" Elena hesitated only briefly before replying, "Yes, but credit me." The cabin's tension shifted as whispers spread faster than drink carts. Passengers showed each other their screens, pointing out comment threads, live reactions, even early news headlines. Passenger targets black woman on Aerostar flight. Viral confrontation raises questions of bias. Richard Campbell, seated again in business class, checked his secure work tablet. Messages were already flooding his inbox from corporate headquarters, public relations, legal, even the CEO's office, all pinging about a situation unfolding in real time. He closed the cover with a sigh, glancing forward toward Selena. He knew she hadn't revealed her full identity yet, and when she did, the fallout would multiply tenfold. Selena leaned back, letting her eyes drift shut. She replayed Patricia's words. Each insult seared into her memory, yet her heart returned to the passengers who had spoken up, the applause that had broken through the hostility. That was the part worth holding on to. Still, she wondered, how many more times will I have to prove I belong? Her thoughts carried her back decades, to being a young girl traveling with her mother. They had been pulled aside at security for no reason, questioned harshly while others streamed past. Her mother's voice still echoed, "Hold your head high. Selena, dignity is our armor." Tonight, she wore that armor again, but she longed for the day she could set it down. The flight continued westward, each mile bringing more eyes to the unfolding drama. In homes across the country, televisions picked up Elena's clips. On commuter trains, office workers watched in disbelief, earbuds pressed tight. In dorm rooms, students shared the videos with captions like, "This is why we film everything." Patricia couldn't escape it, even mid-air. She overheard passengers whispering her name, strangers glaring with open disdain. For the first time, doubt crept into her confidence. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, shrinking into the seat that just an hour ago had felt like her throne. Elena, emboldened by the flood of support, began composing a longer post. What I witnessed tonight was more than an argument. It was a reminder that prejudice still lives among us, in our airports, in our skies. But I also witnessed courage, a woman who refused to bow her head, a crew member who stood up to lies, and a cabin of passengers who chose truth over comfort. She hit post, her words echoing far beyond the metal walls of Flight 452. Jordan checked on Selena again. offering a blanket this time. "Are you holding up?" he asked softly. She gave a faint smile. "I've been through worse, but thank you for asking." "You don't deserve this," he said, his voice low but firm. "No one does," Selina replied. "That's the point." Hours later, as the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the atmosphere remained taut with anticipation. Everyone knew something awaited them on the ground: police, reporters, perhaps both. Patricia sat rigid, rehearsing her story, convinced she could spin herself back into the victim. Selina, by contrast, sat tall and silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She had made her choice long before takeoff, no more hiding. The landing gear clunked down, and the wheels kissed the runway with a jolt. A ripple of murmurs passed through the cabin. Phones buzzed alive as signals returned. Headlines screamed across screens. Aerostar passenger harasses. Black woman airline faces. Scrutiny. Selina powered on her own phone, scrolling briefly. Her name wasn't public yet, but her face was. Thousands were demanding justice for the woman in seat 2A. She drew in a long breath, steadying herself for what came next. As the plane taxied, Richard approached quietly. He bent down near Selina's seat. "There's press waiting," he whispered, "and law enforcement. They'll want statements." Selina met his gaze. "Then it's time," she said simply. Richard nodded, sensing the shift in her tone. "You're sure I'm done letting others define me?" she replied. The fastened seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers rose, collecting their belongings, but all eyes kept drifting to the front of the cabin. Jordan lingered nearby, ready to step in if needed. Elena clutched her phone, recording discreetly, aware that the next few minutes could change everything. Patricia surged to her feet, her voice carrying once more. "Officers over here." "That's the one." "Arrest her." The words dropped like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the crowd. Selina did not flinch. She stood slowly, smoothing her jacket, and faced the waiting officers at the doorway. The cabin held its breath. What happened next would decide whether this story remained another headline of humiliation or transformed into something far more powerful, something that could reshape the conversation not just for Aerostar, but for an entire nation watching. The cabin door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the jet bridge connected with a dull thud. A line of uniformed officers stood waiting, their presence unavoidable. Flashbulbs flickered beyond them, reporters craning for the first glimpse of the woman at the center of a story that had already outrun the aircraft itself. Passengers shuffled forward hesitantly, each glance darting toward seat 2A. Patricia Holt was the first to lunge into the aisle, her voice shrill. "Officers! Right here! That's her, the one who threatened me, the one who shouldn't have even been allowed on this plane. Arrest her before she slips away." She jabbed a finger toward Selina Moore, her tone dripping with triumph as though the law were her personal servant. The officers exchanged wary looks. They had been briefed before the plane landed. They knew the incident was viral. Every move they made was already being live-streamed, dissected, and judged by millions. Selina rose slowly from her seat, her expression serene yet unyielding. Jordan Blake instinctively stepped half a pace closer, as though ready to shield her. Richard Campbell appeared behind them, his face set with determination. Elena Cruz positioned herself discreetly at the edge of the jet bridge, phone lifted to capture what everyone knew would become the defining moment. An officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, are you Dr. Selina Moore?" Selina met his gaze directly. "Yes, I am Dr. Selina Moore, CEO and chairwoman of Aerostar Airlines. The declaration rippled like a shockwave. Gaffes erupted among passengers still disembarking. The officers stiffened. Patricia's confident smile faltered, her jaw opening slightly as though she hadn't heard correctly. What Patricia sputtered. That's impossible. She's lying. She can't be the CEO. Look at her. Richard stepped forward, producing his identification. She's telling the truth. And if you'd like, I'll escort you to corporate headquarters tonight so you can confirm it yourself. The cameras outside the jet bridge erupted in a frenzy. Reporters shouted questions. Is it true? Was she the target of discrimination? What will Aerostar do in response? Selina lifted a hand gently, signaling for calm. She addressed the officers first. I have done nothing wrong. I was harassed by this passenger, accused, humiliated, threatened with arrest for the simple act of sitting in my rightful seat, and I will not be silent about it. The lead officer nodded, visibly relieved. Understood. Dr. Moore, we're here to ensure order. No arrests will be made tonight. Patricia erupted. No, you can't just let her go. She's dangerous. She assaulted me. Selina's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. If you have proof, present it. But the truth has already been recorded by dozens of witnesses, including this young woman here. She gestured toward Elena, who lowered her phone long enough to nod, her expression resolute. Patricia's bravado crumbled. She glanced around, realizing the crowd was no longer with her. Some passengers booed openly. Others muttered, "Shame on you." Selina turned deliberately toward the cameras now, her voice carrying the measured cadence of a leader addressing more than just the people in the room. Tonight, I boarded this flight as a passenger. I was treated as a suspect, as an intruder, not because of anything I did, but because of who I am. That is unacceptable on my airline, or any airline. The words landed heavy, resonating with a watching nation. Patricia tried one final desperate move, clutching her phone. You'll regret this, she hissed. You can't destroy me. Selina met her eyes evenly. I don't need to destroy you. Your actions did that already. The officers stepped in then, not to arrest Selina, but to escort Patricia away for questioning. The crowd parted, murmuring in disbelief as the woman who had demanded someone else's arrest was instead led off in disgrace. Outside, the terminal had transformed into a press gauntlet. Camera crews jostled, microphones stretched forward, reporters fired questions like rapid gunfire. Dr. Moore, will Aerostar press charges? Dr. Moore, what message do you have for passengers of color who face similar treatment? Dr. Moore, how will the airline respond to this viral incident? Selina paused before the cluster of lights and microphones, inhaling deeply. Her heart raced, but her voice emerged calm, almost tender. To every person who has ever been told they don't belong, I see you. Tonight was painful, but it was also revealing. Prejudice thrives in silence, dignity survives in truth, and Aerostar will not shy away from confronting this. Applause broke out, not just from reporters, but from passengers lingering nearby, employees watching from behind counters, even strangers who had gathered once they recognized the moment unfolding. Richard leaned in quietly. We should move you to a secure exit. Selina shook her head. Not yet. They need to hear this. She turned back to the crowd. In the coming days, we will be launching an independent review of how bias manifests in our operations. We will strengthen reporting channels. We will hold ourselves accountable. Because dignity is not optional. It is the standard. Her words were clipped, strong, yet laced with empathy. People leaned closer, phones lifted higher. It wasn't just a press conference, it was a moment of reckoning. Patricia, now half hidden behind officers, shouted bitterly, "She's manipulating you all." Don't believe her, but the cameras barely turned her way. The story had already chosen its heroine and its villain. Selina lowered her gaze for a moment, her thoughts heavy. She had not asked for this spotlight tonight. She had wanted only to test her airline anonymously, to see if the values she preached were lived in practice. The answer had been painful, but the opportunity it gave her was undeniable. As she was finally escorted through the throng, passengers reached out, some clasping her hand briefly, others offering whispered words. "Thank you. Stay strong. We needed this." Elena caught her eye one last time, lifting her phone with a small smile. "It's already over 1 million views," she whispered. Selina smiled faintly. "Then let's make those views count." The automatic doors parted, and the cool night air swept over her as she stepped into a wall of flashing lights. For better or worse, the world now knew the truth. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. The boardroom at Aerostar headquarters in downtown Los Angeles was a far cry from the chaos of the terminal the night before. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. But the people inside the room weren't admiring the view. They were leaning forward, restless, a mix of fear and anticipation buzzing through the air. Every major executive had been summoned. The atmosphere felt like a courtroom, with Dr. Selina Moore at the center. She entered without fanfare, dressed in a simple charcoal suit, her hair tied back neatly. Though she had barely slept, her presence filled the room with quiet authority. Richard Campbell was already at the long table, laptop open, tabs filled with media reports and trending metrics. The numbers were staggering. Flight 442 wasn't just news. It was the headline everywhere. Selina placed her leather folder on the table, then let the silence stretch. It was a tactic she had learned years ago, let discomfort surface before speaking. Finally, she lifted her gaze. "You've all seen the footage," she began. "You've all read the comments. Millions of people are talking about our airline, but not because of our service. Not because of innovation, not because of trust. They're talking about bias, about humiliation, about whether a black woman has the right to sit in first class on an airline she leads." Her words sliced through the room, leaving no place to hide. Some executives shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided her eyes. Selina continued, her voice steady. "Last night was not just a passenger's misbehavior. It was a stress test of our culture. And we failed. The chief operating officer, a stout man named Douglas Reeve, cleared his throat. With respect, Dr. Moore, no airline can control the prejudices of individual passengers." "What happened?" "What happened," Selina interrupted gently but firmly, "was allowed to escalate because our people hesitated, because our training doesn't equip them to confront bias decisively, because silence has been tolerated. That is on us." The chief financial officer, Marlene Katz, spoke next, her voice tinged with worry. "The financial hit is already severe. Bookings dropped 8% overnight. Sponsors are calling. Investors want answers. If we don't control the narrative," Selina raised a hand, "we don't control narratives with spin. We control them with integrity, with proof that we mean what we say. Aerostar's survival won't come from hiding behind excuses. It will come from leading." Richard clicked a key, and the screen behind them lit with a slide titled Operation Phoenix. Selina nodded for him to proceed. "Effective immediately. She announced, "We are launching a full-scale cultural reset. Every employee, from executives to ground staff, will undergo mandatory anti-bias and dignity in service training within 90 days. Passenger feedback channels will be overhauled. Incidents will be reviewed by an independent equity board with authority to act." And she paused, letting the weight land. Every complaint ignored in the past 5 years will be reopened and addressed. Gaffes scattered through the room. Douglas blurted out, "That could cost millions. Lawsuits. Settlements." "It will cost more to do nothing," Selina replied. "Every time we allow prejudice to thrive unchecked, we invite collapse. Last night was proof. We cannot afford another." Marlene leaned forward, brow furrowed. "And the shareholders. They'll demand numbers, not promises." Selina's voice softened, but it carried conviction. "Then we show them that dignity is not charity, it's profitability. We'll measure customer satisfaction across demographics. We'll track loyalty rates after reforms. The data will prove what history has always shown. Respect pays dividends." For a moment, the room stilled. Some executives nodded slowly. Others scribbled notes. But all understood this wasn't optional. Richard spoke again. "There's also the matter of Patricia Holt. The footage implicates her clearly. But media attention hasn't faded. Do we pursue legal action or let it go?" Selina folded her hands, thoughtful. Inside, she felt the tug of anger, memories of Patricia's finger in her face, the call for her arrest. Yet another voice whispered deeper, "Revenge feeds nothing." She spoke at last. "We will not pursue her. The public has already judged her actions. Our focus is not on punishing one woman. It's on fixing the system that let her words nearly become reality." Across the table, a younger manager named Denise Huang exhaled softly, almost in relief. She had feared Selina might take a harder stance, but what she witnessed instead was strength balanced by compassion. The chief legal officer, Harold Stokes, raised a question. "Dr. Moore, what about your own role? The press knows now. They'll want statements from you personally, not just from Aerostar. Do you intend to step forward?" Selina's eyes swept the room. "Yes. I will speak not as a CEO protecting a brand, but as a woman who lived what millions of others live daily. We will not hide this story. We will own it." Her words carried a kind of electricity. The executives exchanged glances, realizing they were watching history in the making. Later, after the meeting adjourned, Selina remained alone by the window. The city stretched beneath her, alive and restless. She thought of her mother again, of that airport line decades ago, of the lessons forged in humiliation, and she thought of Jordan Blake, standing beside her without hesitation, of Elena Cruz, lifting her phone when silence might have been easier, of passengers who had applauded truth. She knew this fight was bigger than one flight, one airline, one headline. It was about rewriting the culture of air travel itself, transforming every boarding gate, every seat, every interaction into a place where dignity was non-negotiable. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "They're calling you the face of justice in the skies." "How do you feel about that?" Selina typed back slowly. "I don't want to be the face. I want to make sure no one else has to wear the scars." She set the phone down and let the silence hold her for a moment. Tomorrow, the campaign would begin press conferences, town halls, tough conversations with staff who resisted change. But tonight, in the stillness of her office, Selina allowed herself a breath of resolve. The storm had broken, and from its wreckage, she would build something better. By dawn the next morning, Aerostar's Los Angeles headquarters had transformed into a media fortress. Satellite trucks lined the street, cables snaked across the pavement, and cameras pointed at the glass doors as if awaiting a celebrity. Except the figure they waited for was not a Hollywood star, but Dr. Selina Moore, whose name now trended across every platform under the tag Ma Justice in the Skies. Inside, the communications team scrambled. Reporters were already speculating about her statement, dissecting every leaked image of the previous night's confrontation. Some painted her as a hero, others framed her as a liability. Selina sat in a quiet corner room, reviewing nothing. She already knew what she wanted to say. Richard Campbell entered, holding a sheaf of notes. "We've drafted talking points," he began, but Selina waved them aside. "I won't need a script," she said. "If people want the truth, they'll get it unfiltered." Richard hesitated. "They'll ask about Patricia Holt. They'll ask why you didn't shut her down immediately. Some will accuse you of playing victim." Selina's eyes sharpened. "Let them. I'll answer with what matters: dignity, justice, and accountability. If we try to package it, we lose the very authenticity people are demanding." Moments later, she stepped onto the stage set up in the main atrium. A sea of microphones bristled, reporters shouted her name, and cameras clicked in a frenzy. Selina stood tall, the spotlight glaring, but her voice carried with clarity. "Good morning," she began. "Last night, on Flight 452, I was accused of being a criminal for the simple act of sitting in a seat I purchased. I was told I did not belong, and when I stood quietly in my place, I was threatened with arrest. Many of you have seen the footage. You know what happened." The atrium hushed. "I want to be clear, this is not about one passenger. It is about a culture inside airlines, inside companies, inside communities that too often allows prejudice to fester unchecked. I will not allow it in Aerostar, not as a leader, not as a woman, and not as a human being." Applause erupted from staff gathered on the balconies above. The reporters, though, pressed forward with questions. "Dr. Moore, what do you say to passengers who believe this was just an isolated altercation?" She met the gaze of the journalist. If it were isolated, the story wouldn't resonate with millions of people. It resonates because too many have lived it. Silenced, doubted, humiliated. I'm here to say their dignity matters. Our dignity matters. Another reporter shouted. "Will Aerostar press charges against Patricia Holt?" Selina shook her head. "No. The public has judged her actions already. Our mission is not to destroy one individual, but to ensure no employee, no passenger, ever faces that treatment again." The questions flew rapid fire. What will change? How will you guarantee accountability? Selina lifted her folder and tapped it. "Operation Phoenix is already in motion. Every employee will complete mandatory dignity and service training within 90 days. An independent equity board will review incidents transparently, and every ignored complaint from the past 5 years will be reopened and addressed. No more silence." Reporters scribbled furiously. The message was bold, almost unheard of in corporate aviation. Then came the sharpest question. "Dr. Moore, some critics claim you exploited your position as CEO to dramatize this incident, that you made yourself a victim to push an agenda. What do you say to them?" For a brief moment, the room seemed to tilt. Richard stiffened in the wings, fearing backlash. But Selina didn't flinch. "I wish this had been theater," she said softly. "I wish no black woman ever had to endure being treated as a suspect in the very place she belongs. But I didn't script Patricia Holt's words. I didn't script the fear in the eyes of those who watched. The only script we follow now is justice. The crowd stilled, absorbing her words. Then the applause returned, louder, stronger. When the conference ended, Selena stepped away from the cameras and found herself face to face with Elena Cruz, the young student whose live stream had gone viral. Elena's eyes brimmed with emotion. "I never thought my phone could matter that much," she admitted. "But people keep messaging me. They're saying, 'Thank you for showing us.'" Selena placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Courage is contagious. You reminded the world that silence protects injustice. Don't ever underestimate that." Nearby, Jordan Blake stood nervously, still in his crisp uniform. "Doctor." "More," he stammered. I didn't know if speaking up would cost me my job. But when I saw you stand firm, I couldn't stay quiet." Selena smiled warmly. "You chose integrity over fear. That makes you the future of this airline." By afternoon, the press conference footage dominated television screens. Editorials praised Selena's candor, calling her the voice corporate America has long ignored. Social media lit up with testimonials, passengers of color sharing their own humiliations, employees confessing moments when they had stayed silent. The hashtag #GameJustice in the skies became a global rallying cry. Not everyone celebrated, though. Investors worried. Anonymous online trolls accused Selena of exaggeration. Patricia Holt's family released a shaky video insisting she was not racist, which only fueled further debate. That evening, Selena returned to her office, exhaustion heavy but spirit unbroken. On her desk lay dozens of letters and emails forwarded by staff stories of passengers who had been denied dignity, employees who felt voiceless. One note, scrawled on lined paper, caught her eye. "I'm a single mom who cleans cabins after flights. I've been called names too many times to count. Today, for the first time, I felt like someone with power said I mattered. Thank you." Selena folded the letter gently, her throat tight. This was why the fight mattered, not just for headlines, not for reputation, but for the invisible lives carried through every corridor of the industry. As the city lights glittered outside, Richard entered quietly. "The board is nervous," he admitted. "Some fear you've gone too far, too fast." Selena looked up from the letter. "Then they've underestimated the cost of doing nothing. We're not just repairing an airline, we're redefining it." The applause of the press conference still echoed in public memory. But inside Aerostar's corridors, tension thickened. Not every employee welcomed Selena Moore's reforms. Flyers appeared overnight in break rooms, unsigned but bold. "Stop the witch hunt. Protect our crew." Some saw the changes as overdue justice. Others whispered of betrayal, of being thrown under the bus for one passenger's humiliation. Jordan Blake noticed the unease first. In the crew lounge, as he poured himself coffee, 2 senior flight attendants fell silent the moment he walked in. One muttered just loud enough, "That's the boy who sided with her." The other scoffed. "He thinks being her pet will protect him." Jordan swallowed hard. Courage was contagious. Selena had said, but so was resentment. At headquarters, Richard Campbell briefed Selena. "There's a faction forming. They're calling themselves the Sky Tradition Alliance. Mostly veteran staff. They argue your reforms undermine authority and put crew at risk of false accusations." Selena listened, her jaw tight but her tone steady. "Authority isn't the problem. Abuse of authority is. If they can't tell the difference, then we need to teach it louder." Richard hesitated. "They're planning a walkout tomorrow at LAX. If it happens, flights will be grounded." Selena closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. The easy path would be to threaten termination, but the easy path was rarely the right one. That evening, she drove herself to the LAX Crew Center. No cameras, no entourage, just Selena in a plain blazer, walking into a crowded break room buzzing with defiance. Dozens of employees turned their heads, some arms crossed, some eyes cold. Patricia Holt's name was scrawled on posters. Justice for crew. Stop the CEO circus. Selena stepped onto a chair, not raising her voice but commanding silence. I hear your anger, she began. I hear your fear. You think these reforms are punishment, that they're about taking power away from you. But let me ask you, what kind of power is worth keeping if it rests on humiliating others? Murmurs rippled. A man in his 50s, gray hair under his cap, shot back. We risk our lives in the air every day. You've never been in a cabin when someone lashes out. Now one complaint can end our careers. Selena nodded. I respect your fear. But justice isn't a guillotine. It's a balance. That's why our new equity board will include employee representatives. No one will lose their career without evidence. But no passenger will lose their dignity without consequence either. From the back, a voice shouted. Easy for you to say you're CEO. Selena met the challenge head on. You're right. I'm CEO. And with that comes responsibility. But responsibility means facing truths even when they're uncomfortable. I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to build a culture where passengers and crew can both feel safe. If you can't imagine that, then maybe the airline we're building isn't the airline for you. Silence held the room. Some faces softened, others hardened. Then Jordan Blake, heart pounding, stepped forward. I used to think silence protected me. It didn't. It just made me complicit. Dr. Moore stood her ground last week, and because she did, I found the courage to tell the truth. We can either be the ones passengers fear or the ones they trust. The tension cracked. A young woman near the front whispered, He's right. Another nodded slowly. The resistance didn't vanish, but its edges dulled. The walkout never happened. Still, the revolt was not over. The next day, tabloids ran leaked emails from Marlene Katz, the chief operating officer, questioning Selena's judgment. Our CEO is jeopardizing shareholder value to play activist. The email read, Harold Stokes, the board member with the booming voice, went on television, suggesting Aerostar needed stability, not crusades. Selena watched the segment in her office, her chest heavy. Doubt flickered. Was she pushing too fast? Were Richard's warnings right? She looked again at the handwritten note from the single mother in cabin services. The words steadied her for the first time. I felt like someone with power said I mattered. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked her empty house, the silence pressing in. She thought of her late husband, who used to remind her, you don't measure leadership by how loud the applause is, but by who you're willing to lose for the sake of what's right. She whispered into the stillness, I won't back down. The next morning, Selena convened the board. Cameras weren't allowed this time, but tensions flared hotter than any press conference. Harold Stokes leaned across the polished mahogany table. You're bleeding this company? Selena, shareholders are calling. Pilots are calling. You're turning Aerostar into a social experiment. Selena remained calm. It's not an experiment. It's survival. Look at the numbers. Passenger loyalty is surging since we took a stand. Do you know what bleeds a company? Silence, scandal, lawsuits, a culture people don't trust, Marlene Katz interjected. And what about employee morale? Half our veterans think you've declared war on them. Selena leaned forward. I don't want war. I want transformation. And I'm willing to sit in every break room, face every angry stare, to make sure our employees know this isn't about taking from them, it's about giving back dignity to everyone. The boardroom crackled with tension, but Richard spoke up at last. Gentlemen, ladies, we can debate ideology all day, or we can look at data. Bookings for next quarter are up 8%. Social sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. Other airlines are being dragged into the conversation, and they're stumbling. Aerostar's leading. Silence. Then Harold slammed his folder shut. This isn't over. After the meeting, Richard joined Selena in the hallway. You made enemies today, he warned. Selena's reply was quiet but firm. Better enemies than betraying what's right. By week's end, employees began to shift. Some still grumbled, but others approached Jordan privately, thanking him for speaking up. Helena Cruz, the student live streamer, returned to headquarters with a group of young activists, proposing a partnership to document bias in travel. Selena welcomed them, knowing change didn't come top-down alone. It came from voices rising together. But beneath the surface, she sensed turbulence ahead. Patricia Holt had hired an aggressive attorney. Media outlets hinted at a lawsuit claiming wrongful humiliation. And inside the board, Marlene and Harold were rallying support against her. Selena stood at her office window, watching planes take off, their lights cutting through the dusk. Her reflection stared back strong, tired, unyielding. She whispered to herself, Justice isn't a moment. It's a war of attrition, and I am ready. The headline broke on a quiet Monday morning. Passenger files $50 million lawsuit against Aerostar CEO. Screens in airports across the country blared Patricia Holt's name. Her face carefully lit in a studio interview. She sat beside a polished attorney named Victor Dalton, who declared with perfect enunciation, My client has been publicly defamed, her livelihood destroyed, and her reputation irreparably harmed by the reckless actions of Aerostar's leadership. Selena Moore watched the broadcast from her office, her jaw tightening. Dalton leaned into the camera, delivering his dagger. We will prove, Doctor, Moore orchestrated this spectacle for personal gain, that she weaponized her role as CEO to humiliate an innocent passenger. The interviewer asked Patricia directly, Do you regret what you said on that flight? Patricia's eyes brimmed with crocodile tears. I was frightened. I thought she was threatening me. And now I can't even go to the grocery store without being attacked. My children are bullied at school. This has destroyed my life. Selena muted the screen. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. Richard Campbell entered, dropping a folder on her desk. She's playing victim. And Dalton's good. He thrives on turning facts into fog. Selena opened the folder. Inside were affidavits from passengers, video transcripts, security footage stills. But she knew Dalton's strategy wasn't about evidence. It was about spectacle. We won't win this in court alone, Selena murmured. We'll win it in the court of truth. That afternoon, she summoned her legal counsel, Marjorie Flint, a seasoned litigator with a voice like steel. Dalton will try to paint you as vindictive, Marjorie warned. He'll argue you singled out Patricia for publicity. Selena leaned forward. Then we counter with transparency. Every scrap of footage, every witness statement, nothing hidden. If we bury them in truth, their lies suffocate. Within days, Aerostar launched a public transparency portal, a digital archive of the incident, witness accounts, and the company's new reforms. It was unprecedented. Corporations rarely aired their laundry this openly. But Selina knew secrecy was Dalton's oxygen. Deny him that, and he'd flounder. Meanwhile, Patricia's side escalated. They paraded her on morning shows, painting her as the real victim of discrimination, targeted, harassed, unfairly vilified. Hashtags sprouted from her camp, or Justice for Patricia and Vo CEO Bully. Troll farms amplified her story, muddying the waters. Elena Cruz watched in fury. She posted her unedited live stream, reminding viewers, "You saw it with your own eyes." She wasn't afraid. She was cruel. Don't let lies rewrite what we all witnessed. The clip gained millions of shares. Patricia's tears looked hollower by the day. Inside Aerostar, employees braced for battle. Some worried the lawsuit would bankrupt the company. Others saw Selina's resolve and found courage. Jordan Blake, though nervous, volunteered to testify publicly. "I won't let them twist this. I was there. I saw everything." But the most surprising support came from unexpected quarters. A retired pilot, Captain Walter Hughes, released an op-ed. "I flew for 32 years. I've seen passengers treated unfairly, and I've seen colleagues look away. What Dr. Moore is doing is long overdue." His words struck a chord with older employees, softening resistance. In the courtroom, Dalton strutted like a showman. He waved photographs of Patricia's children, described their supposed torment, painted Selina as a power-hungry tyrant. Patricia dabbed her eyes with a tissue, each gesture rehearsed. When Selina took the stand, Dalton's smile sharpened. "Dr. Moore, is it true you concealed your identity as CEO to provoke this incident?" Selina met his gaze, calm as stone. "I traveled anonymously to evaluate service standards. That is not provocation, it is accountability." Dalton leaned closer. "But isn't it convenient that your hidden presence led to a viral video and a crusade that made you a hero?" Selina's voice did not waver. "If defending human dignity makes me a hero, I'll accept the title. But the truth is simpler. I was humiliated for existing in a space I belonged to, and millions of people saw themselves in that humiliation. That's why this matters, not because of me, but because of them." The courtroom stilled. Even Dalton faltered for a moment. Marjorie rose for cross-examination of Patricia. She projected Elena's raw live stream on the screen. Patricia hurling insults, seizing Selina's bag, shouting for her arrest. The jury leaned forward. The mask cracked. Marjorie's questions were scalpel sharp. "Ms. Holt, can you explain why, in this footage, you say, and I quote, 'Women like you should be in handcuffs, not first class'? Does that sound like fear or prejudice?" Patricia's face reddened. She stumbled. I was overwhelmed. And when you threw her luggage onto the jet bridge, was that fear too?" The silence was damning. By recess, Dalton's swagger had dulled. Outside, cameras swarmed, and the narrative shifted. Headlines read, "Livestream contradicts lawsuit claims." Back at headquarters, Selina reflected alone in her office. Despite the victories, doubt gnawed. Lawsuits weren't just battles of truth. They were wars of endurance. Could Aerostar survive months of scrutiny? Could she? Her phone buzzed. A message from Elena. "Hold the line. We've got your back." Moments later, Jordan sent a note, too. "You showed me courage. Let me return it." Selina exhaled, a small smile breaking. This wasn't her fight alone anymore. It was a collective uprising, employees, passengers, allies refusing to be silent. By the trial's second week, Dalton's theatrics grew desperate. He accused Aerostar of orchestrating harassment against Patricia. He produced dubious witnesses who crumbled under cross-examination. Meanwhile, Selena's transparency portal became a model for corporate accountability, studied in business schools and praised by civil rights leaders. The final blow came when Captain Hughes testified, his voice gravelly but resolute. The truth is simple. We either uphold dignity for all passengers, or we abandon the very values this industry claims to represent. Dr. Moore has the courage to do what most of us never dared. When the jury retired, the room was tense. Hours dragged. Finally, they returned with their verdict. Patricia Holt's claims were unfounded. No damages awarded. Case dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Selena addressed reporters not with gloating, but with grace. This isn't about victory in a courtroom. It's about victory for truth. Aerostar will continue its reforms. And to those who've suffered in silence, I see you. And this fight is for you. Cheers erupted, drowning out Patricia's attorney as he stormed away. Elena hugged Selena tightly. Jordan grinned through tears. Even Richard, ever cautious, allowed himself a laugh. But Selena knew the battle wasn't over. Lawsuits could be dismissed, but prejudice was harder to eradicate. Still, as she stood beneath the California sun, she felt the tide turning not just for her, not just for Aerostar, but for the skies themselves. The verdict in Selena Moore's favor reverberated far beyond Los Angeles. Social media exploded, not just in the United States, but across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Justice in the skies trended worldwide. News outlets in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Johannesburg ran segments dissecting the incident, the lawsuit, and Selena's unprecedented transparency. Videos of her composed confrontation with Patricia Holt were translated into multiple languages. Suddenly, a single flight incident had become a symbol for global accountability in aviation. Inside Aerostar headquarters, the atmosphere shifted. Employees who had once whispered doubts now approached openly with ideas to improve training and reporting systems. Jordan Blake found himself in meetings with senior staff, sharing insights from cabin experiences he had previously feared speaking about. People need to know we're listening, Selena reminded him, emphasizing the human side of reform. Elena Cruz collaborated with a group of university students to create a digital archive of passenger experiences, amplifying the voices of those who had faced discrimination. She sent Selena a summary report one evening, filled with poignant stories of flight attendant humiliated for their accent, a passenger denied service due to skin color, and countless tales of subtle microaggressions that cumulatively eroded trust in airlines. Selena read each account carefully, her resolve deepening. Meanwhile, the corporate world took notice. Competitors scrambled to review their own protocols. Aerostar's courage had set a new standard, and any airline ignoring the lessons risked public backlash. Selena's press conference strategy became a case study in corporate ethics programs, highlighting how transparency and accountability could not only protect a company's reputation, but also strengthen it. But Selena knew that public sentiment alone wouldn't sustain change. She convened a global summit, inviting executives, regulators, civil rights leaders, and airline professionals, held in a bright conference center overlooking the Pacific. The summit was designed to be immersive. Panels explored implicit bias, passenger safety, equitable treatment, and corporate accountability. Selena opened the event with a quiet but firm address. When one person's dignity is dismissed, she said, we all suffer. This is not a partisan issue. It is human. Airlines must acknowledge their role in shaping experiences that either affirm or diminish the value of every passenger. Aerostar will lead by example, but the responsibility is collective. The summit featured interactive workshops. One session allowed flight attendants to share experiences anonymously, highlighting systemic blind spots in training programs. Another examined passenger reporting mechanisms, showing how simple failures in protocol allowed microaggressions to escalate unchecked. Representatives from 5 continents offered perspectives, creating a mosaic of global insight that emphasized both cultural differences and universal principles of respect. News coverage framed Selena as a pioneer, a leader willing to confront not just individual acts of racism, but entrenched institutional norms. Interviews highlighted her calm demeanor, measured language, and ability to inspire both empathy and action. She rarely raised her voice, but when she did, her words resonated across screens. Equity is not a privilege, she told one network. It is a responsibility. The response from passengers was immediate. Thousands submitted testimonials, praising the visibility of their struggles and the proactive approach Aerostar now took. Many shared how the viral footage had encouraged them to speak up in other sectors at hotels, in banking, in public service. Justice in the skies became more than a hashtag. It became a movement encouraging vigilance, documentation, and advocacy for equitable treatment in all public spaces. Even former skeptics inside Aerostar shifted perspective. Marlene Katz, the COO who had questioned Selena's reforms, publicly acknowledged in an internal memo that the global attention validated the approach. Change was inevitable. She wrote, Selena's leadership ensured it would be ethical, inclusive, and sustainable. Harold Stokes, once vocally critical, quietly initiated a review of internal policies to align with the summit's findings. Resistance had softened. Collaboration began to flourish. Selena herself remained reflective. One evening, overlooking the runway, she spoke to Richard Campbell. "This is bigger than Aerostar," she said softly. "We've shown that corporate transparency can ripple into society, but it's fragile. One misstep, and momentum stalls." Richard nodded. "Your leadership is inspiring, but it's relentless. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Selena paused, her gaze on the planes taxiing below. "Leadership is responsibility, not comfort. I will be tested again, but I will not let fear dictate the sky we leave for the next generation." The summit concluded with a formal declaration. Airlines across multiple continents pledged to implement dignity protocols, equity boards, and mandatory bias training. Media coverage framed this as the Aerostar standard, a blueprint for human-centered aviation. Social platforms celebrated the outcome, and for the first time, many employees felt they were part of a system that valued both accountability and compassion. At the end of the day, Selena returned to her office, exhausted but resolute. Elena dropped by with her camera crew. "Do you think this will really make a difference?" she asked, half hopeful, half skeptical. Selena smiled gently. "Change doesn't happen overnight. But when people see that accountability can exist without fear, when they witness courage in action, they start to believe it's possible, and belief is contagious." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden reflections across the tarmac. Selena leaned back in her chair, thinking of all the passengers, employees, and students who had found their voices. For the first time in months, a sense of calm filled her office. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for today, the movement had taken flight. Months after the global summit, Selena Moore realized that symbolic victories were only the first step. The real challenge lay in turning momentum into systemic change. She called a high-level strategy meeting at Aerostar headquarters, inviting airline executives, regulators, union leaders, and civil rights advocates. The room hummed with anticipation and skepticism, the air tense with the weight of possibility. Selena began calmly, her voice measured yet unwavering. "We've seen what happens when injustice goes unchecked. Passengers and employees alike suffer. It's time for a structural reset, not just at Aerostar, but across the industry. She laid out a detailed plan, standardized equity training, anonymous reporting channels, mandatory de-escalation procedures, and external audits of passenger complaints and employee conduct. She emphasized measurable outcomes metrics to track bias incidents, response times, and passenger satisfaction. At first, resistance was palpable. John Harrington, CEO of a major competitor, leaned back in his chair with a skeptical smirk. "Dr. Moore, this sounds noble, but airlines operate on margins. Are you saying you want to spend millions retraining staff, auditing, and monitoring every single interaction? That's impractical." Selena's gaze was steady. Margins matter, but trust matters more. Airlines that ignore fairness lose customers, reputation, and ultimately, revenue. Investment in equity is an investment in sustainability. The discussion heated when labor union representatives raised concerns. Veteran crew members feared overreach, fearing they could be punished for subjective interpretations of bias. Selena acknowledged the concern. "We will not punish intent. We will hold accountable actions that harm dignity or safety. Oversight is about protection, not policing." A compromise emerged. An independent oversight board would include passenger advocates, veteran crew, and legal experts. It would review complaints, advise on training, and publish an annual report for public accountability. The room shifted from skepticism to cautious curiosity. Selena then unveiled Aerostar's pilot program, a mobile application allowing passengers to report discrimination in real time, coupled with immediate escalation to trained staff and executive monitoring. Jordan Blake, now leading a cabin task force, demonstrated the app. Passengers could describe incidents, upload photos or video, and receive responses within hours. Crew could review the dashboard, track trends, and receive coaching based on data, not hearsay. Media coverage of the initiative was immediate. Headlines touted it as revolutionary. Aerostar sets new standard in airline equity. Passenger dignity now measurable. A CEO changes the sky. Other airlines scrambled to develop similar programs, fearing negative perception if they lagged behind. Despite the applause, Selena faced internal challenges. Some senior executives, including Marlene Katz, argued for a slower rollout. "We risk operational chaos," she cautioned. "Not every market or culture interprets equity the same way. Implementing these policies uniformly could provoke backlash." Selena nodded, but remained resolute. "Equity is not negotiable. Implementation may require nuance, but the principle is absolute. Any deviation risks undermining the entire mission." Over the next few weeks, she personally visited multiple hubs: Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Seattle, observing interactions between staff and passengers. She spoke with crew privately, hearing fears, frustrations, and suggestions. One attendant, Malik Simmons, shared a story of a passenger who had been denied assistance due to skin color. "We never want to be that airline," he said quietly. Selena listened, asked questions, and promised follow-up training modules tailored to real-life scenarios. By the third month, the program expanded internationally. Partnerships formed with airlines in Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and the UK. Selena chaired virtual workshops across time zones, discussing best practices, cultural considerations, and the importance of transparency. She emphasized that this was not philanthropy. It was industry survival, moral and financial. Back at Aerostar headquarters, Richard Campbell monitored data feeds. Complaint resolution times had improved by 60%, and passenger satisfaction scores had reached unprecedented highs. Jordan Blake reported that cabin morale was improving, particularly among younger crew members who felt empowered to speak up without fear of retaliation. Elena Cruz documented the rollout, highlighting compelling stories: a flight attendant resolving a tense confrontation using de-escalation techniques, a passenger publicly praising the airline for handling a complaint fairly, and a senior pilot acknowledging his own biases and committing to mentor others. Each story reinforced the narrative that change was possible and necessary, yet challenges persisted. Patricia Holt, still bitter, attempted a media resurgence, claiming that Aerostar's reforms were performative. Selena addressed the allegations publicly, calmly releasing metrics, testimonials, and video evidence demonstrating real-world impact. Her transparency diffused the narrative. The public began to scrutinize Patricia's motives more than the airline's practices. The final confirmation of success came unexpectedly. A consumer watchdog published a comprehensive report. Aerostar's equity measures had become the benchmark, influencing policy at other major carriers. Shareholders noted not only increased loyalty, but also long-term revenue growth linked to public trust. Selena Moore had transformed what started as a single incident into a blueprint for systemic reform. One quiet evening, Selena sat alone in her office, overlooking the tarmac. The sky reflected shades of amber and indigo as planes taxied under the fading sunlight. Jordan entered, carrying a cup of coffee. "It's incredible what you've built," he said. "Not just the policies, but the culture. People feel seen." Selena smiled faintly. "It's never just about me. It's about the people who have been overlooked, dismissed, or humiliated. Every flight, every interaction matters." Jordan nodded. "And they're noticing. Passengers, crew, even competitors, they're talking about Aerostar as a model. Your leadership has changed the conversation." Selena exhaled slowly. "It's a start, but vigilance is endless. Equity is not static. It must evolve as the world evolves. Our work is never done, but today, at least, the skies feel a little fairer." As the night settled, the terminal lights flickered softly across the runway. Selena Moore remained at her window, a solitary figure against the vast expanse of the airport, contemplative yet undeterred. In her hands, she held not power for its own sake, but the steady, patient force of justice, the conviction that even the most entrenched systems could bend toward dignity if led with courage, transparency, and unwavering principle. The industry-wide reforms had settled into practice, and months had turned into a year since the day Amanda Holt's meltdown went viral. For Dr. Selena Moore, life had become both quieter and fuller. Her calendar remained packed with board meetings, media requests, and policy roundtables. But she also carved out time to reconnect with herself: long walks at dawn, handwritten notes to her staff, evenings spent reading instead of negotiating. The storm had passed, yet its echoes continued to shape lives far beyond Aerostar. One late afternoon, Selena was invited to speak at a leadership forum at Georgetown University. The auditorium buzzed with students, professors, and executives who had followed her story. As she walked onto the stage, applause rose like a wave, but her smile remained measured, her demeanor calm. She began with a story not about planes or CEOs, but about her grandmother. "My grandmother worked as a cleaner in a small-town school. She taught me that dignity is not something given by position or wealth. It's something no one can take unless you allow it. That truth carried me through storms I never expected, and it carried me through that flight when someone tried to erase my place." The audience leaned in. Selena didn't lecture. She invited. She described the ordeal, the humiliation, and the turning point when silence could no longer be an option. She admitted her moments of doubt, the temptation to simply walk away, the fear that confronting Amanda would spiral out of control. Yet she explained why she had chosen to remain calm. I realized I wasn't just standing for myself. I was standing for every passenger who had been dismissed, for every crew member silenced, for every child who would one day step on a plane and deserve to feel safe. Her words landed not with force, but with quiet weight. Many in the audience wiped their eyes. At the Q&A, a student stood trembling, voice cracking. "Dr. Moore, I've been treated unfairly because of how I look. I usually stay quiet because I'm scared. How do you find the courage to speak?" Selena paused, her gaze softening. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting while afraid, because silence costs more. You don't have to shout. Sometimes the most powerful statement is composure, backed by truth. And remember, you're never truly alone. People may be silent in the moment, but they are watching, learning. Your stand may give them the strength to take theirs. The auditorium erupted in applause. For many, the forum wasn't just a lecture. It was a moment of personal clarity. Weeks later, Aerostar launched a scholarship fund named the Dignity Fellowship, supporting underrepresented students pursuing aviation careers. Elena Cruz, now a recognized documentary filmmaker, produced a short film about the initiative. Her piece combined footage from that infamous flight, testimonies from crew members, and snapshots of Selena's reforms in action. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and earned standing ovations. Elena herself stepped onto the stage, thanking Selena for turning an ordinary passenger's live stream into a movement that reshaped an entire industry. Meanwhile, Jordan Blake had become a symbol of courageous crew members. Promoted to purser, he now trained new attendants in both service and equity. He often told recruits, "You may think your role is small, but you carry people's dignity in your hands. Never underestimate the weight of that." His sessions became legendary, mixing humor, vulnerability, and real-world case studies. Even Richard Campbell, usually the quiet strategist, found himself sought after for his insight into crisis leadership. He admitted privately to Selena one evening over coffee, "I used to think your insistence on reform was idealism. Now I see it was survival, and not just for Aerostar, but for aviation itself." Selena chuckled softly. Sometimes idealism's just another word for seeing the future clearly. The larger world had shifted too. Other industries began adopting Aerostar's frameworks, anonymous equity reporting, dignity audits, and executive accountability. Hospitals, tech firms, and even universities sought consultations. Selena resisted turning her work into a personal brand. She insisted it remain about the mission, not her name. Still, she couldn't avoid becoming a symbol. Yet amid recognition, Selena never forgot the personal toll. There were nights when she still replayed Amanda Holt's scream in her mind. When the weight of public scrutiny pressed heavily, she journaled often, recording her fears and frustrations, not for publication but for her own clarity. "Justice is not glamorous," she wrote once. "It's heavy, repetitive, and often lonely. But dignity makes it worth the wait." One day, unexpectedly, Selena received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, the envelope plain. Inside, a brief note. "Dr. Moore, I was on that flight. I didn't speak up when I should have. I sat in silence while Amanda tried to destroy your dignity. I regret it every day. Watching you stand calmly changed me. I've promised myself I will never stay silent again. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." A fellow passenger. Selena folded the letter gently, her eyes misting. She placed it in a small box on her desk alongside other personal mementos, her grandmother's handkerchief, a faded boarding pass, and a photo of her parents. It reminded her that change often begins invisibly in quiet shifts of conscience that ripple outward. As the one-year anniversary of the incident approached, media outlets revisited the story. Some focused on Amanda Holt's downfall, her failed apology tour, her retreat from public life. But Selena declined to comment on Amanda. Instead, she redirected attention to the progress Safer Skies, empowered crew, inspired students. This was never about one woman's cruelty. She told a reporter, it was about whether we would let cruelty define the skies, and we chose differently. On the anniversary itself, Aerostar hosted a low-key event at its headquarters. Staff from every level attended: janitors, flight attendants, pilots, executives. Selena spoke briefly, thanking them for embodying dignity daily. She concluded with a message that resonated deeply. The measure of justice is not one grand gesture, but countless small choices to listen, to respect, to pause before judging. The skies don't belong to one group, one race, one class. They belong to everyone who dares to fly. That is our legacy. The audience rose in applause, but Selena stepped back quietly, letting her team share the spotlight. Jordan and Elena told their stories, while Malik Simmons recounted how training had saved a tense flight from escalation. Laughter mingled with tears, and the event closed not with grandeur, but with a collective sense of belonging. That night, as Selena returned home, she sat on her porch overlooking the quiet city. The hum of planes drifted faintly overhead. She sipped her tea slowly, reflecting not on her power, but on the community that had formed from one painful moment. She whispered softly to the night, as if to her grandmother, "We did it. We turned hurt into healing. The world would move on, as it always did. New crises would come. New injustices would demand response. But Selena Moore had left an indelible mark not just on an airline, not just on an industry, but on countless hearts that now believed dignity was worth defending. And in that belief lay the truest legacy. At its heart, this story reminds us that dignity is not a luxury reserved for a few. It is a birthright for all. Dr. Selena Moore faced humiliation that could have broken her spirit. Yet she chose calm over rage, truth over silence. In doing so, she not only defended herself but also gave voice to countless others who had been ignored or mistreated. The lesson for our daily lives is clear when faced with injustice. We always have a choice. We can allow anger or shame to silence us, or we can respond with composure and integrity. Often, it is the quiet strength, not the loudest voice, that creates the deepest change. For those of us who are older, perhaps retired, or looking back on long years of work and family, this story asks us to reflect how many times have we stayed silent when we wished we had spoken. It is never too late to model courage, compassion, and dignity for the next generation. Because when one person stands with calm resolve, the ripple can transform not just an airline, but an entire society. Thank you so much for watching and sharing your time with us. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like the video. Share it with someone who might need encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. Your support helps us bring more voices, more hope, and more dignity into the world.